All right, so I think I'm good to go. I was just making sure that I have both Facebook and YouTube going. Looks like I do. So, hey, welcome everybody. Not sure how many people are watching at the moment. Can't see anywhere where it shows me that information. Oh, there's one. Okay, I have at least one person watching on Facebook. Not sure if that includes me or not. Oh, this disappeared, so maybe it wasn't. Anyhow, but I plan to keep this video up even after it's gone live, after my live session is done. So anyhow, I'm doing Facebook and YouTube. So whichever you prefer to watch from, feel free to check those out. I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but yeah, I guess we'll try it out, see how it goes. So my intent of doing these Wednesday Word Wonders is just to have a weekly show where I can talk about writing issues, answer questions that people have about writing, spelling, grammar, punctuation, capitalization, things like that, as a way to try to help improve people's writing skills, but as well to be able to expose my writing expertise and just hopefully make things a bit easier for people, help people become a little bit smarter, at least where writing is concerned. Can't help you in other areas, I'm afraid. So I have two questions that friends have sent me, and I thought I would take a look at those and see if other questions come up. So the first question is from a friend by the name of Shane. He asks me actually two questions, and this one's a little bit complex, so it might take me a little bit to get through. The first question is, can you please tell us how to know when to use comma, semicolon, or colon? And then the second question is, when is the first word used after these punctuation marks capitalized? So that's almost like four questions in one. So that's fine, because I've written blog posts about each of these. Actually, you know what? I'll even comment. So I'll post a couple links. So there, my first link is to my post on commas, and then I'll post a link to a post I've done on semicolons. I don't have one on periods, because periods are pretty self-explanatory, but I do have one about capitalization. So I'll post that one as well. All right, and so if you want to check those out in the future, you can. So to start with, using commas. And the commas are probably the piece of punctuation I have to edit the most when I'm editing documents for my clients. People really don't know how to use commas. And commas can be tricky sometimes, because sometimes it's just a matter of preference. So I'll go through a few of the times where you would use commas, and then maybe just touch on some of the more stylistic issues. So the first one that's pretty self-explanatory is separating list items. So if I was going to say, I'm going to the store to buy apples, oranges, and bananas, there would definitely be a comma between apples and oranges, because they're two separate parts of the same list. And then it's debatable whether there should be a comma between oranges and. So apples, comma, oranges, comma, and bananas. Some people argue that you don't need a comma between oranges and and. That's referred to as the Oxford comma. I prefer using the Oxford comma just because it's more likely to avoid confusion than including it. And there are a couple of instances where keeping the Oxford comma in might lead to confusion, but generally it helps avoid confusion. So using commas in a list to separate list items is one way to use a comma. And that's probably one of the ways people use commas the most effectively. The second one is separating modifying adjectives. So I said something like, I'm wearing the brown long coat. You would use a comma between brown and long because you're not describing the long coat, you're describing the coat that happens to be brown and long. You could do, let's see, what would be an example? Dress pants. You could say, I'm wearing the black dress pants, where dress pants is a specific type of pants. So you're not trying to describe the pants as dressy, but they're a specific type of pants. And so you wouldn't need a comma between dark and dress in that case. But when you're using modifying adjectives to describe a specific noun, you would use comma to separate those adjectives. The next one is before conjunctions linking independent clauses. So if you were to say, I am going to the store and I am going to do recycling, you need a comma before and, because I am going to the store is an independent clause. You can have that as a separate sentence. I am going to the store. If you say that, it's clear what you mean. Everybody understands it. If you say, I am going to do recycling, that too is an independent clause. And because you're joining the two independent clauses and, you need a comma before the and. Now, if you were using and in the same way, but you were joining the independent clause with the dependent clause, you don't need the comma. For example, I am going to the store and doing recycling. Doing recycling doesn't make any sense. It's not a complete sentence. It's dependent on parts of the other independent clause. So you wouldn't need a comma there. After introductory words or phrases. So this would be, in other words, I love you. So in other words is an introductory phrase. You don't need to say in other words. You could just say I love you, and that can stand on its own. But in other words is introducing your phrase in relation to the previous comments you made. So you would use a comma after the introductory words or phrases. Around non-restrictive phrases. So a non-restrictive phrase is a phrase in a sentence that isn't necessary. It doesn't need to be in the sentence to describe the subject you're talking about. So for example, if I was going to say, I live in the house, which is red, that would tell you that there are multiple houses on this particular street, and you happen to live in the only red one. If I was to say, I live in, and in that case, you would need a comma to separate the which from the house. If I was to say, I live in the house that is red, and there is only one house on that street, and it happens to be red, well, that's not a non-restrictive, or that's a restrictive phrase. Okay, so sorry, I think I got this backwards. So in the first example, I live in the house, which is red. Let me make this a bit clearer. I live in the house on Main Street, which is red. So in this case, which is red is a non-restrictive clause, and it's non-restrictive because there's only one house on that street, and it happens to be red. Now, if you're to say, I live in the house that is red on Main Street, that's a restrictive phrase, and that's because there are multiple houses on Main Street, and yours happens to be the red one. So in the first instance, you would need commas. So I live in the house, which is red, 2 commas, on Main Street. Because which is red isn't necessarily because there's only one house. Whether you go to the red house or you don't go to the red house, it's only the one house on Main Street. So hopefully that's clear. That might have been a little bit convoluted. With dates and addresses. So in this case, if you are writing a date in the American format, so it's month, day, and then year, you would need a comma between day and year. You don't need a comma after the month. So it's just month, day, comma, year. If you're doing International formats, your day, month, year, you don't need any commas. And then as far as addresses go, this would be specifically for towns and provinces or towns and states, that sort of thing. So I live in Lethbridge, comma, Alberta. And you could also say I live in Lethbridge, comma, Alberta. Or there is, let's see, what's another way? So between Lethbridge, comma, Alberta, and you would need a comma after the Alberta. Between Lethbridge, comma, Alberta, comma, and Regina, comma, Saskatchewan, comma, I had lived 37 years. So that's where you need a comma. So you normally need a comma between the city and the state or province, and then you need a comma after the province if the sentence continues on. When directly addressing somebody, so if I was going to say, Mary, do you love me? You need a comma after Mary. So Mary, comma, do you love me? Or another way, I'd like you, Jack and Jill, to take care of this presentation. You need a comma around Jack and Jill. I'd like you, comma, Jack and Jill, comma, to take care of this presentation. And then finally, at the salutation and close of a letter. So dear John, comma, and then you can go on with your letter. And at the end, sincerely, comma, and then your name at the end of the letter. So that's how you use comma. As far as capitalization, well, really there are only 3 times when you need to capitalize. I mean, basically. Proper nouns, so Canada, Jane, Saskatchewan, first words in a sentence, and the main words in a title of a book, title of a movie, those sorts of things. So unless your word isn't a proper noun, the first word in a sentence, which it probably won't be if it's after a comma, or the main words in a title, you probably don't need to capitalize it. Now, semicolons. Semicolons are a little bit trickier than commas. Even though there are fewer instances where you would use them, people still don't understand them. You would use semicolons to separate clauses, generally independent clauses. So rather than saying I am going shopping and I am going to do recycling, you could say I am going shopping, semicolon, I'm going to do recycling. So you can replace the end with a semicolon. That's an easy way to remember it. If you're using 2 independent clauses and you're separating them with and, you could replace and with a semicolon. Emphasizing relatedness. This is when you have 2 independent clauses again, but you need to show a stronger relationship than having separate sentences with periods provides. So for example, I have a son, period. I am a father, period. Those are a little bit disjointed because you can see that they're related. Having a son makes me a father. And so rather than saying I have a son, so I'm a father, you could just say I have a son, semicolon, I am a father. So that's when I ate my vegetables, semicolon, I get dessert. Another example. Those sentences are related. So semicolons can be used to indicate relatedness. Another thing you can use is you can use a semicolon for before conjunctions when you're linking complex clauses. So for example, if I eat all my vegetables, comma, I get dessert. But if I don't finish my vegetables, comma, I'll miss out on ice cream. So those 2 clauses, you can use a semicolon to separate them, similar to the one I just finished saying. Another one is separating items in complex lists. So the first example we used of commas was I'm going to the store to buy apples, comma, oranges, comma, and bananas. This is the same idea, except in this case, your list has a whole bunch of commas in it or other punctuation such as parentheses. Having a semicolon helps to make it clear. If you have a whole bunch of commas in your list items, then it's hard. It can be confusing what is a list item and what isn't. So for example, I like cookies and ice cream, semicolon, apples, comma, bananas, and pineapple, semicolon, and chicken and sausage. So the cookies and ice cream are related as desserts. Apples, bananas, and pineapples are related as fruit, and chicken and sausage are related as meats. And so we separate them with comma, with semicolons. We separate the groupings with semicolons just to indicate that there's some relationships between these different groups. Here's another example, similar to another example I used before. I have lived in Regina, Saskatchewan, semicolon, Vancouver, British Columbia, semicolon, and Lethbridge, Alberta. All right, so again, these semicolons are used because if you don't have them, then it looks like you're talking about 6 places: Regina, Saskatchewan, Vancouver, British Columbia, Lethbridge, Alberta. It looks like you're talking about 6 places rather than 3 places in 3 provinces. And finally, the other most common use for a semicolon is with what are referred to as conjunctive adverbs and transitional phrases. So again, related to what we talked about before, I have a son, semicolon, therefore I am a father. I didn't eat my vegetables, semicolon, however, I still get dessert. So that's where you would use semicolons. So hopefully that's clear. And again, with capitalization, follow the same rules I mentioned before. Proper noun, first word in a sentence, or main words in a title. Unless it's one of those things, you probably don't need to capitalize it. And finally, periods. Well, periods are pretty self-explanatory, I think. They're just used to indicate the end of a sentence, the end of an independent, complete sentence. So I am going shopping, period. It's a complete thought. It's talking about the subject, me, and what I'm doing. I'm going shopping. So that's a complete thought. There are other, you can use periods and abbreviations, things like that. But as functioning as a period, you really would just use it at the end of a sentence. So, and of course, anything after a period would have to be capitalized, except for maybe branding like iPod. Obviously, that would stay as a lowercase I and things like that. All right, so I think I got to everything in Shane's question. So hopefully, Shane, if you listen to this or if you watch this, you can leave me a comment and let me know if I answered your question. If not, I can give it a shot next week as well. The next question I got is from a friend named Steve. So Steve, I think, was kind of trying to make a joke, but there's a valid question in there. So I'll share it, even though it's a little bit humorous. But I'll also address his question as well, because I think it could be useful to people. So Steve asked, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Actually, I'll do it a little bit fast. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? There you go. Is that alliteration, or do all the words have to start with the same letter to qualify? So alliteration is the same sounds. So how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? So there's alliteration in there. But I think one of the reasons it could be confusing is because there's multiple examples of alliteration. So wood is in there 4 times. And actually, it could be even more confusing if it's how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. I think that's what it's supposed to be. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Well, I think Steve might have got that one wrong. So in that case, then there are 2 types of woods appearing 5 times. And then chuck is in there 4 times. And so I think that's where the alliteration comes in. And a little bit confusing because there's 2 types of alliteration. There's alliteration for the W, actually not even just the W, but the entire sound of the word would. And then there's alliteration for chuck as well. So there's alliteration. Do all the words have to start with the same letter to qualify? Well, technically, yes, but you can have an alliterative sentence that isn't all the same letter sound in every single word. So this is an example. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? So how much, if, those aren't part of the alliteration, but the sentence is still alliterative because it does have repetitive sounds. So technically, you have to have the same sounds for it to be alliteration, but that doesn't mean every letter sound has to be the same in the entire sentence for the sentence to have alliteration in it. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, those are the two questions I got. Wasn't quite sure if how many people were going to join in and watch my video. And see if I had any more. I'm just going to go check out my pages to see if any other comments have happened. If so, I can. Oh, so okay. So I had. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. So I had Mary join. My friend Stephanie Karsten joined. My friend Sarah Hooper joined. So that's great. So I had a few people join. Mary says, "You're always fixing my comments." That is true. But I think mostly because I edit Mary's work more than I edit anybody else's work. But I do fix a lot of commas. Almost every single piece, that's kind of repetitive, but almost every piece I edit, I have to fix commas. I have to add commas, take out commas, virtually every time. So it's not just a thing that I have to fix with Mary's. Okay, so just replying to that, and I think that's it. I don't have any other comments from anybody. So nothing on YouTube. I'm not even sure anybody joined me on YouTube today. But all right, I think that's it. So it looks like my show takes about half an hour. That's kind of cool to know. So I'll be able to keep an eye on it for next time. If you're watching this after my show, after I've done the live streaming, let me know what your thoughts are. If you like this format, if you have other questions that you want me to answer. If you're watching this after it's already gone live, leave a comment and I'll be sure to try to answer it in next week's video. I plan to do these every week. Hopefully it picks up and there's some interest in them. And if I don't have too many questions, then hopefully it doesn't take too long. I don't want this to go too long because it's just going to be boring people. So anyhow, you can also find me online on my Facebook page. I'm also on Twitter. Hot Pepper Communications on Facebook, Hot Pepper Communications on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn, both as my personal account and my business page, Hot Pepper Communications. And then I'm also on YouTube, Hot Pepper Communications. You can find me there. And on Facebook, I'm generally sharing social media and writing posts. I do the same thing on Twitter. I retweet stuff on Twitter as well. LinkedIn, mostly sharing the same things I share on Facebook. Also on YouTube and Facebook, I post weekly writing tips. And sometimes social media tips as well. So hopefully people will find those useful. But yeah, look forward to your feedback. And if you have any questions, just pop them into the comments below and I'll try to discuss them next week. Thanks for watching. And I look forward to hearing from you and talking to you again soon.